This is the Widow Podcast, and I am Karen Sutton, the Widow Coach. I'll be supporting you through the loss of your life partner so you can find a more positive way through your grief. I want to give you hope after loss and to know that when you are ready, you can create a meaningful life for yourself with the help of me, Karen Sutton, and the Widow Podcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Widow Podcast. Today I have the wonderful Marie Alessi with me, coming to talk all the way from Australia, which is super exciting. It's early in the morning here in the UK and into the evening with you, isn't it, Marie?
Yeah, it is. It's quite dark outside already.
Oh, bless you. So I've known Marie now. How long was it been, Marie? Was it last summer we connected, I think?
Probably about a year.
Yeah. Which is wonderful because we have a very similar mission, but on completely opposite sides of the world. And a lot of people find me in Australia and New Zealand, and I always direct them to Marie. And I think Marie does the same.
Vice versa, yeah, absolutely.
When people find Marie,
your time zone doesn't work for me. Please speak to Karen.
I know it's impossible. It does feel impossible. I do have a couple of ladies in my programs that are in Australia and New Zealand, but you know that the times that they're obviously early risers normally, because
it is shocking. Yeah.
So I thought it'd be really good for you to come and have a chat and obviously spread the word that you are out there helping people in amazing ways. So you are yourself a widow, a mum, and founder of Loving Life After Loss, which I just love. I've kind of, one of my strap lines is fall in love with life again. And so
beautiful.
So very similar.
I didn't even know that.
And I think it's a lovely way of telling people a little bit about what you do, helping people find their way after loss. So tell us a little bit about you, Marie, and your story, and a little bit about Rob and what happened.
Sure. So I was actually not that far from you because I'm originally from Austria. I was born in Vienna and moved to Australia in 2004. Following a really, really strong calling that I had for a very long time. I remember, like, on my 17th birthday, my dad asking me, what do you want for your birthday? I'm like, a ticket to Australia. I have no idea where that came from. I had it for a really, really long time. As far as I can remember, I had this urge to move to Australia. It wasn't just to see it, to visit it. I had this urge to move to Australia. I cannot explain it. And I knew nothing about Australia, nothing. I even thought that Sydney was the capital. That's how little I knew about Australia. But then when I first came in 97, I had this sense of coming home after ages. I was really that, oh my God, this is where I belong. It took me another 7 years. I finally moved there for good. And 10 months later, I met Rob. So I was like, oh, it was so meant to be. I met this beautiful man 10 months after moving for good. And another 10 months later, we were married. So if anybody would have told me that beforehand, you're going to move to the other side of the world and get married 10 months later, I'm like, no way, Jose. If he's Mr. Right, he'll still be Mr. Right in 3 to 5 years. But Rob proposed to me like 5 months into going out with me, or actually even just meeting me, not even going out, into meeting me. 5 months later, he proposed to me, and I was like, of course. And I was like, wow, that when you know. Obviously, all of a sudden knew what that meant. So it was really beautiful. And we had our dream barefoot wedding on the beach. Like, both of us had always dreamt about that, not knowing from each other that we wanted that as a wedding. We were both like, oh my God, you're talking about my absolute dream wedding. And then 2 and 4 years later, we had Flynn and Jed, our 2 gorgeous boys. So we really did live that absolute romantic, beautiful, perfect life. And even to all of our friends and family and co-workers, we were all that couple. They were like, oh, Rob and Marie, but it was just so beautiful to be that couple. And when I had my boys, I moved out of advertising. I worked in advertising for over a decade, and I knew when I start my family, I want to leave that world. It doesn't match with family. And we had this plan, like, 3 to 5 year plan for me to stay home with the boys and then find something else, but something else found me, and that was coaching. I delved into the self-development world when the boys were about 1 and 3, and started my own business. And yeah, everything I focused on was mindset. So I was already in this mindset coaching industry for about 7 years. And then one day Rob went on a business trip and never came home. So that was such a cut through fork in the road moment where Rob died from a brain aneurysm. There was no pre-warning. There was nothing that could have indicated it. He just collapsed in the shower and died. It was on the spot. And that, as you can imagine, was just so... I often describe this moment as, you know, when your favorite song is playing on the record player and all of a sudden the needle scratches over and the music stops and everything's silent. That's how it felt to me that moment. I still remember it. It was deafening silence when I received that phone call. And I had those super clinical words: "I'm sorry to inform you that your husband is deceased in a hotel room in Perth this morning." And I was like, I still remember that moment being so surreal. There are no words to describe that. It was just so unexpected. I mean, that day I already felt anxiety levels rising because he was supposed to call me in the morning and the phone call didn't come. And then it went on and on and on and on. And then I called the hotel and I actually alarmed them. I said, "Look, my husband's staying with you and he was supposed to call me, and please don't think I'm one of those freaked out wives stalking my husband, but there's something not right. Can you please send somebody to his room?" And the moment I said that, I had this split second of a vision of him collapsing in the shower. And I was like, I remember shaking my head thinking, "Don't go there, Marie, don't drive yourself crazy." But I couldn't help but say it out loud. So I said to them, "And can you please check in the shower?" I thought they must think I'm completely nuts, you know.
Wow.
But that's where they found him. That's exactly how it happened. I was like, wow,
Wow,
we were
that's
so connected.
yeah.
It was just, yeah. And that was the beginning of a completely new life, a new world for us, as you can imagine.
So how old were your boys then? Because that was in 2018, wasn't
10
it?
and 8.
10 and
Yeah,
8.
10 and
So
8.
you then had to
Yeah.
tell the boys as well.
Yeah, they were downstairs sitting on the couch waiting for me to take them to have keto training. They did martial arts back then, and they were already dressed in their uniform. And you know, I've been doing that whole one more phone call, one more phone call. I was going mental at that stage. I was really, my anxiety levels were so high because I knew something had happened, but I didn't expect that, you know. And so I was trying to play it all cool with them because I didn't want to alarm them or scare them, not knowing what was going on. And then I had this 3-second moment walking downstairs, knowing I had to share that with them and no idea how, you know, that there is no sugarcoating a message like your dad just passed. That's, you just got to say it straight out. And that was really,
Who did
I think it
you
was the hardest thing I ever had to do my entire life.
yeah, it's knowing that you are telling your children something that you know
Yeah,
is going to change their lives in such a profound way
forever. Yeah.
is not easy to do. Who did you first call for you for help? Because you know, obviously you've moved to Australia, your family you know, aren't
I've
nearby.
never been asked this question. Far out. Nobody. But I did call somebody to come and sit with me, my back then closest friend. And I said to her, "I can't get hold of Rob. There's something going on." And she came and sat with me, and she was actually on the phone calling the hospital in Perth. She's like, "Let's just call all the hospitals. Somebody must know something, you know, if you don't hear from him." So she was on the phone to the first hospital of her list. And she was just, I still remember that weird moment, that surreal moment. She was just spelling our surname. She was just ALE. And I was just doing that to her. And she looked at me and she knew to hang up. And that's while she was spelling my surname, I was getting the phone call and the news that my husband had passed. So I had somebody with me, yeah. But I never thought about calling anyone, even. It was just in that moment, I had her with me. And she said, "I'll take the boys." And I said to her, "No way, I need to take them with me. They just lost their dad. Do you think I'll leave them behind now?" There's no way, you know.
Yeah.
I knew she meant well, but I knew that I had to take them with me. And the same thing the next morning. So we drove to Rob's mum and dad to share the news because I thought there's no way I want them to find out over the phone. I have to tell them in person, you know. So first I sat with the boys. There was that shock moment, the screaming, the crying, the all of that, the hugging, the just being in the moment. And then I have no idea, I can't tell you how long it took, maybe half an hour, I don't know. And then I said to them, we need to go and see Nana and Nana. We need to pack up and go. And they were like, okay, they were just so in functioning mode with me. And we drove. And on the way, I called his eldest brother first, then my mom, because she had already booked her flight to come out to Australia for my little one's first Holy Communion. So that was all very bizarre timing. So she arrived 10 days later, but yeah, and then I called Rob's sister, and then I drove there, told his parents, then all of a sudden all the family started coming in, and I was sitting in my numbness, and we slept the night there, and the next morning we packed our stuff and went to Perth to identify Rob's body. So it was this, you know, I think I've just gone into functioning mode for quite a few weeks after that happened, for at least the 2-3 weeks leading up to the funeral and all that. And then in the same week of the funeral, we had Jed's Holy Communion in the same week. Wednesday funeral, Sunday Holy Communion, and after that, I broke down. I just collapsed. It was just nervous breakdown. I had this nervous breakdown, like just falling apart in the kitchen. I started with one sentence that burst out of me where I was like, I just need peace and quiet. And I was like, it was like this valve opening and I couldn't close it anymore. I started saying that sentence louder and louder and louder until I screamed it on top of my lungs. I still remember that. And somehow I found myself on the bottom of the floor, whacking kitchen cupboards, screaming that sentence over and over again. I just need peace and quiet. And then everything was silent again, you know, this complete silent, surreal moment where my mind was spinning and going like, oh, the boys, they're upstairs, they heard it. You know, I knew I had to go upstairs and talk to them about what happened. I needed to snap back into my body. I was just full on out of body experience, primal as. And in my mind, I was just thinking the neighbors are going to call police or ambulance, are going to take me away from my kids. And it was crazy that day, but it was my starting point of, I think I need to go and see someone. And I did. The week after, I started with a positive psychologist, and I worked with her for about 4 months, and it was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Best decision I've ever made.
You say that was a positive psychologist?
Yeah.
So how does that differ then from a psychologist?
Yeah, I think the simplest way to explain it without going into too much technical terms, etc., is when you work with a psychologist, they usually work with you to get you from a negative space back into neutral, and a positive psychologist works with you to get you back into the positive. So if you do have a bad day, you could still go from an 8 to a 10, from an 8 to a 2. But you know, from a 0 space, there is only the negative to go to when you have a bad day. So that's very simplified, but there is a slight difference in the positive psychologist that I always loved. So I always had her as my backup when I had clients come in that were just beyond the coaching experience. They really needed a psychologist to work with. So I had her on my call list, but I never really met her until that day. I never thought that I would call her for me one day, you know.
It's amazing, actually, because I use the term sort of positively grieving a lot, and you know, finding a more positive way through your grief. And I can see when I say it, there's a jarring of like, how can you put the two words positive and grief together? And it was really interesting that you said that about, you know, positive psychology. I really believe in it. I think it's an incredible thing, but it's a very hard word for people to hear, to work with or alongside when they're in a really hard, because we have a notion, don't we, that positive means we're happy and we're upbeat all the time, and we're doing okay, and we never moan and we never have bad days. And it doesn't mean that, you know. It just means that you have an inner desire to feel better, to find your way through something in a more positive way, in a nurturing way, in a kinder way. I mean, that's how I see it, but I just think
100%, I agree with you, Karen. Yeah, it's just that we're so trained to not expect that in grief, you know, and that positive psychology is actually a real term, not just something that I made up. There's also a slightly different training to become a positive psychologist. So you can actually look it up when you want to study. You can study clinical psychiatrist, psychologist, you can be positive psychologist. So there are different sort of section of it, you know. So the background is all very similar, but then they go into different directions in how they deal with it. And I just love that approach very much.
do you think your previous coaching experience and knowledge and your mindsets helped you navigate your grief in a more positive way, that you were
100%?
So how do you think, when you've worked with people that maybe haven't had that versus people that have, how do you see the nuances, I suppose, the differences in how they approach it, and for you?
Yeah, it is so easy for me to spot and feel, I should actually say feel the difference more than anything, because of who I was before and who I was after that period of becoming a coach. Because becoming a coach is really, it has such an impact on your own life, because naturally you start cleaning out the cobwebs, you know, from an emotional perspective. You start dealing with unhealed childhood trauma. You start dealing with, you know, all these negative mindsets, or we call it the limiting beliefs. It's such a coaching jargon to use that, but you know, we start dealing with all of that from our own perspective on our own life. And I guess you can relate to that, Karen, when you get clients in and they come with something that you haven't healed. You're very likely to then look at that yourself when there's something that you haven't looked at, or that might trigger something within you. We're like, oh, good reminder, I need to look at that too. So it's that constant evolving with your grief, with everything that you teach. And for me, there was this absolute difference in how I dealt with grief before the training and after. And for me, my first very significant loss, I had losses before then. Like my grandmother passed in our house when I was 12, and I saw her for the first time. I saw actually a dead body, maybe even before, but it doesn't really matter. I don't want to get sidetracked with that. But the first really significant and deep loss for me was my dad when I was 20. I was very, very close to him, and that really pulled the rug underneath my feet for over a year. I remember I was just falling apart. I had nothing. I had no training in mindset. I had done no therapy at that stage. And about a year later, when I was around the 21 and a half mark, I got handed a book by a friend of mine that triggered me to go like, there's stuff to look at. There's so much stuff to look at. It was really like opening a can of worms. And that resulted in 10 years of therapy on and off. I would go half a year, then have like a year and a half break, and then another half a year. And I tried out a lot of different modalities and a lot of different ways to look at it. And the one thing that I've learned, and I've actually just learned that consciously now through Rob's passing, is that adversity often re-triggers unhealed wounds in your childhood. And you can see that as a double whammy. My goodness, now I've got that to deal with as well. Or you can deal with it like I like to call it a hidden gift in adversity. And you go like, oh, beautiful. There's something else that I can embrace, that I can heal. You can see things like that as an opportunity to heal, or you can see it as another stumbling block. And that in itself is already such a, you know, it's the same thing. It's just your perspective is very different. And that's the base to everything I do, shifting your perspective into finding the gifts and seeing opportunity in all of that.
I love that. I think that's so powerful, isn't it? And it's definitely something, you know, I try and teach people, you know, that I work with in my program all the time, is recognizing how you are viewing something, how you know, you are creating a story around it, the meaning that you're attaching to it, and your perspective. And is there another way?
Love
and because it's so powerful, isn't it, Marie? That absolute the words that we use, the way we view a
Oh,
situation, how we
yeah.
perceive it, how we choose to use that as
Mm,
a learning, as
yeah.
growth, as healing.
Yeah.
But it's again, it's a bit like the term positivity, isn't it? When I
Mm,
talk to people in my program about, well, what's the opportunity in this situation that
yeah.
you find yourself in?
Love it.
Because there is always opportunity for learning, for
Mm,
growth, for
yeah.
healing, for understanding, and creating awareness around you and what you're doing. Everything's a
Mm,
sign, a signal, information. But again,
absolutely.
it's so hard for us. I found it really hard when I went, I wasn't a coach before Simon died. I was a
Mm.
midwife, and I didn't know
I
anything
love
about
it. I
coaching.
didn't know that about you. Because I ran happy birthing classes before Rob died.
Did
So isn't that
you?
incredible? There's another parallel that we have. I love it.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. Oh, how
Yeah.
weird. So when I didn't have, and when I discovered the coaching world, and
Mm,
learning about limiting beliefs and growth mindset, and
mm,
all of
yeah.
those
All the
things, it
beautiful
just
things.
beautiful things, and they continue to be beautiful things. I am
Mm,
you don't get to a point where you've discovered everything, do you? You keep learning, you keep
no.
growing, you keep
And the more you
healing.
learn, the more you open up to everything. It's just, yeah, it's such an incredible upward spiral.
So when you are talking to people, we'll talk a bit about sort of what you do in a minute, but when you are sharing
Mm,
this with the people that you work with, do you sometimes feel a resistance as well, in terms of challenging people a little bit in how they view
mm,
something? Is there a
mm.
resistance there?
I used to, I have to admit, at the beginning, but it was more like a little bit of the fear of um, their vulnerability and, just maybe, oh, maybe that doesn't sit right with the person and I could hurt them or offend them. And then the more I let go of that and really stepped into where I wanted them to be, where I wanted to guide them, where I wanted to take them with me, the more I claimed that, the more people were like, oh my God, thank goodness there's somebody who feels that too, or sees it. And I was like, wow. So it's my own fear of, oh, I could offend someone, oh, I could maybe, or maybe that could hurt them. Once I dropped that fear and really stepped into that leadership role, if you want to call it that, the more people went like, oh my God, thank you for doing that. And I remember a couple of moments that were huge step ups for me, really claiming. And I was nervous about it. And I was like, I cannot possibly share this. And I'm going to share one example. That was a really, really big one. There is a piece that you might have come across as well, because it was a piece written, and I cannot remember the author because the surname is such a complicated one. And she has written a piece about widowhood. Widowhood is this and that. Widowhood is this and that. Widowhood is this and that. And I remember when somebody shared it in my movement, I read through it, and automatically, because when you do the work, you automatically go into, you have your filters, how you would reframe things, how you would say things differently. So I read the whole thing with my loving love after loss filter on it. And I started writing it out with that. And I was like, I'm going to rewrite that piece into my language, because language, as we said before, you said that so nicely, it is so powerful. The language that we use in grief in particular, in general already, but in grief in particular, it's so powerful. So I started rewriting that. And I remember I got really nervous about posting it. And I posted it underneath the post saying, like, I can't help but having my filter on when I read this, and this is my version of it. And then all of a sudden, within an hour, I had 20, 30 comments on that going like, oh my God, this is amazing. Oh my God, this is amazing. And people were thanking me left, right, and center. And I'm like, oh, I can't believe people are actually liking this. I was so worried that I could offend people. How could you say it so simple and this? And I'm like, well, reframing it is simple. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is simple. The actual theory of it, we know is simple. The doing it is not easy. That's the part we have to learn. So I then went and shared it on LinkedIn, and then I went and shared it on my newsletter, and I shared that piece all over the place. And within a day or two, I had hundreds of comments going like, this is so brilliant. We need to talk about this more often. And this is so, I've never heard anybody say it. I'm like, And this is where I realized people are really craving healing, but they haven't learned to be allowed that. And this is the part in the grief that I think you and I, Karen, we're both fighting for that. We both in this advocacy of you are allowed to heal. We all have this real urge, this real wanting to heal within us, but we haven't learned to allow to live that and to allow healing in. And that's where you and I and a lot of other people come in to create that change, to offer that path to healing, because it is possible.
Absolutely. That's so beautiful, Marie. And you're right. We do struggle to give ourselves permission to strive for a life that can feel good again, where we can find some peace, some contentment, some balance, even joy and fun and love and laughter.
Yes.
And
Oh my goodness.
and we're allowed that, and
yeah,
we can have it as well. I think it's difficult for people, and the reason they block themselves from that is they make it mean something it doesn't mean. And often that story is, and I know you know this, that if I do that, if I go through that process of finding my way through this and loving life again, does that mean I no longer love my person? Does that mean I will no longer grieve them? Does that mean I'm being disloyal?
or do
What will
I
they think of me?
disrespect them? Yeah.
And we place these meanings on it that simply aren't true. And society has created this belief system that grief just looks like sadness and pain and tears and heartache and misery and loneliness. And it does, doesn't it? Of course it does. We know that. But it also looks like growth and opportunity and learning and understanding and connection and joy and love and laughter. And it all lives side by side, doesn't it? They coexist, but we can't
it's
see
so
that.
Interesting. I love that you bring that up, Karen, because I often say, you know, before Rob passed, my life was mainly joy, but we all have good and bad days, always. And nobody would ever question that. Nobody would find it abnormal that you have bad days between your good days. But when you flip it around and you look at the other side of grief, and then you have lost a person, and then there is grief, and then all of a sudden people don't do that for the sadness. Why is it not possible to have happiness in sadness when it's possible to have sadness in happiness? They always coexist. They are always there simultaneously. They are always there, both of them. It just depends on what you give more focus to. And we all know that. What we focus on is what we see all the time, and we can practice that. Even in grief, we can practice to focus on joy, on happiness, on love, whatever that is that you want to attract in your life, or that you're missing so much in your life. Because we're missing that. It's just, I love that you say that, because we really do we need more advocacy around that. I really want to challenge that narrative of grief. It's incredible.
It is. And you know, the way you kind of flipped it is, you know, it's an aha moment, isn't it? It's like, oh God, yeah, actually I was happy, but I had bad days, and now I'm sad, I've lost my person, but I can have, you know, flip it, look at the reverse of it, and kind of go, it's normal, it's natural. We cannot sit in sadness permanently, and also we can't expect ourselves to be happy.
But it's not fun.
Well, no, it's not. You're right, we can absolutely, and but it's really not fun. So tell me then, Marie, because I know after you lost Rob, you did something quite extraordinary with your two boys, didn't you?
Yes. So I did two quite extraordinary things, actually, straight after Rob passed, or very shortly after. 4 months after, I remember sitting in the office of my positive psychologist, the beautiful Emily, and talking about exactly what we just chatted about, this expectation, what people feel like they expect of you, how to grieve and how grief is supposed to look like in your life. And that it really stressed me out, and that there's so much that people expect of me, and then they're really puzzled when I'm joyful or happy, and they're like, you know, she's not grieving properly, or just still in denial and all of that stuff. And I'm like, oh, there is no denial. Wrong. Anyway, different story. And she looked at me and said, so what does grief mean to you, Marie? And to my surprise, the first word that came up was empowerment. And I said it to her, and I said, that is really bizarre. That word just came up for me when you asked me that. She's like, that's interesting. You talk about that. And I did. And I said, it's really amazing, because I felt so carried and looked after and guided after Rob passed away. I felt there was never a, what do I do next? Where do I go? What do I do with that? I felt there was always an answer. There was always, I'm absolutely certain it was Rob guiding me on that journey. You know, that's my belief anyway. Yeah. And I did not realize how empowered I felt, how much strength I felt through the process till she asked me that. And it literally felt to me that when Rob passed, as if he had poured all his strength into me. It's like, yeah, I don't need it anymore. You can have it, you know. It's like, and I had this very, very strong sense for the first time when I stood on stage holding the eulogy, talking to like 500 plus people in the audience for the first time in my life, that I spoke to such a big audience. And I felt so guided. I felt so held. I felt so much love, and I felt so confident and so much joy and love in my heart. I felt him standing right next to me. So that was the moment where I looked at her and I said, I think I need to write a book about this. And she said, I think it would be great. And a month later, I had written and published a book, Loving Love After Loss. I had shared my story 4 months after Rob passed. I had published a book. And that, to me, looking back now, I'm thinking, I can't believe I've written and published a book 4 months after my husband died, you know. But I had this urge to share with the world who Rob was and how amazing he was. And I wanted to share the story as a love legacy for him, and as a story to read for the boys one day when they're old enough, but also to share a bit of love and happiness and joy and hope and all of that into the world. What I didn't expect was that the book ranked in the top 100 of Australian bestsellers. So I was absolutely blown away. I was so blown away by that. And then 3 weeks later, we were on the plane, and I took the boys traveling around the world for 2 months. So I had this whirlwind of writing a book, publishing it, packing my bags. And then all of a sudden I sat in the Maldives going like, what on earth just happened? You know, it was just this coming down, sitting in this absolute paradise, and just, you know, I think it was the first real conscious break, and trying to catch up with everything that had happened in our lives emotionally. You know, it was really that, it was such a good break for us, traveling around the world. It was
I mean, both things are amazing. To write a book in that space of time when you're grieving, like I could barely string a sentence together. So like writing a book is like properly impressive, Marie. I think fair play to you. And like you say, what a beautiful gift to give the world and your boys, and to write down Rob's legacy and allow him to live on in something. You know, that's a beautiful thing to do. Now, it's interesting. I've been talking about this in some of my groups recently. This whole don't make any big decisions in the first year. You know, like it's a big thing, isn't it, in grief? And I'm not. I mean, they're two pretty big decisions. I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to
at least 3 times.
Yeah, that's it. I'm going to take my 2 young boys, and we are going to go on a trip around the world. I'm going to leave home. I'm going to leave everything I know, which often becomes our safety, our sanctuary, our safe space, because the world feels big and scary, and we feel vulnerable and exposed in it. And you decided to go for it and do something really very brave and courageous. What was it that made you do that? What did you get from it? And I'm assuming you feel like it was the right thing for you and the boys, and it gave you...
Oh yeah, 100%. It was such a good decision for us. Like, even the boys, we still talk about it nowadays. You know, it was really... So the decision actually came from Rob and I together, and it was something that we had planned to do as a family of 4, to travel around the world and take the boys out of school for an entire year, and homeschool them. And we had started an online business that started to become like really quite lucrative. And we were like, let's focus on building that. You know, we've got half a year and then let's just take off and work from, you know, the perfect laptop lifestyle like everybody dreams of. And we had planned that. And I still, till this day, I still haven't taken it down. I've got the entire itinerary. I cut out all the places where I wanted to go and put it all over our 4-door wardrobe, and it's still there. I still have all the images of the places we wanted to travel to. We had the itinerary standing. We wanted to go through through South America, come through, I can't remember if Mexico was on the list or not, but South America, travel through South America, go through Europe, come back through Asia, and then back to Australia. You know, we wanted to have 1 year of endless summer and just travel together and show the boys the world. And nobody knew about that. We really hardly talked to anyone about that. It was just Rob and I who had that. And I didn't even tell the boys, not even in hindsight, because, you know, what is the price of that? Telling them, oh, you know, Dad and I wanted to take you traveling for a year. I thought, no, I'm going to tell them what I can do, not what we can't do anymore. And that's what started it. There's no way I could homeschool 2 boys on my own while grieving and traveling the world. No way. So I literally just started, okay, what can I do? And I thought 2 months is a good time frame to really get a break, really step away, and which are the countries that I can travel to with the boys on my own. Definitely not South America, which I still wanted to do, but that'll come another day. But yeah, I knew that I wanted to go to La Palma, Canary Islands, because my godfather had migrated to La Palma when I went to Australia, and I had never had the chance to visit him because when we went back to Austria to visit friends and family, it would have been another 5-hour flight, and you don't do that. You know, it's just that little bit too far out of the way. And I'm like, I'm coming to visit you, and he is so close to my heart. I stayed with him for 9 days. He has he built a couple of guest houses there. We had our own little house to ourselves, and we had 9 days with him, which was absolutely beautiful. But I had this gap. He said, I've only got this 1 week where there's no guests in there. I'm going to book it out for you. You can come with your boys. We'll look after you. But there was this 1 week before. I'm like, I want to leave here. I can't wait till then. My heart was ready to go. I needed to go. So I still remember standing at a travel agency, and she had this massive world map on her wall there. And I went like, okay, this is La Palma, this is Australia. It's like, Maldives, we're going to the Maldives. And I'm like, woohoo, this is so cool. So I went like roughly in the middle. And I always had this dream. I was in the Maldives when I was 25. And I remember being so blown away by it, thinking, one day I'll come back and I want to stay in an overwater bungalow. And that's what we did. So we started off the trip with a week in an overwater bungalow in the Maldives, snorkeling and just had our own private little pool. And it was just absolute paradise. And still, when I ask, where would you ever go back? They're like, Maldives. That's the first thing. Yeah. It's just brilliant. Yeah. And then we had Europe, and we went to Paris. Glenn wanted to go to Paris and eat escargot in Paris. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. I have to tell you, this is the funniest story, because I thought, no way in hell would I ever, ever, ever eat escargot. It's disgusting beyond measure. I know some people will disagree, but it's this mind over matter food. You know, it's like, no way that I wanted to eat it. And then Flynn ordered, like, he waited till the last day and he ordered his, half a dozen of escargot. That's the minimum order that you have to have. He wanted to just taste it. And we sat in this little cafe in France with the typical arrogant waiter, and I'm scraping my little bit of French together to order this. And he's poking his fork around, and I'm thinking, just smile and wave, just smile and wave. And he's like, do you want to try it with me, Mom? And I was like, God, no. It's like, no way. And his response was, Dad would have tried it with me.
Oh.
Somebody take the knife out of my back. And I knew in that moment I had to try it. There was no way around. I knew in that moment I had to try it. And the funniest part was that even my little one tried it, who's Mr. Absolute Fancy Pants, would not try anything. And you can't force him. You can't bribe him. He can't if he says no, it's no. But without a word, he was like, yeah, I'll have a go too. I'm like, so it became this very disgusting, very funny, very bonding moment for us that we still talk about. It was, yeah, that was
Amazing.
our
And how were
escargot
they? Were they
story.
as bad as you thought they were going to be?
I'd never, ever, ever tried again. Thank you. It's just the consistency. It's the mind over matter thing, that knowing what I'm eating. I'm like, no, it's, yeah.
Not
I'm a
cool.
previous vegetarian. I was a vegetarian for 20 years of my life because of animals. I'm like, this is a really new level of eating animals for me, where it's like, no.
Oh, do
It
you
was
know
it
what
was
though?
good. It was really
Well
good.
done, well done.
Mm.
And what an amazing thing to do for your boys. What's your view then on the whole? I know what my view is, and I share it quite openly, but what's
Yeah.
your view on the don't make any big decisions or do anything, in the first 12 months?
I think there's two sides to the story. I mean, when I look at my own life, like I've broken a rule 3 times. I've written a book, I've traveled around the world, and I've started a global movement, 9 months after Rob passed. So that all happened within the first 1 year mark. And all three of those were things where I'm like, well, the book, of course, you could say maybe one day I'll regret it, no questions asked, but there was so much love in the book. So why wouldn't I share it? The trip around the world, I don't think you can ever really regret traveling. I don't know, unless you have a really, really bad experience, which we luckily didn't have. The movement, honestly, I could have closed it down any stage if it would have been too hard for me or too confronting or too whatever. But it turned out the complete opposite. It's all I do. It's what I do for a living these days. And to me, it has become such an amazing purpose to help people heal for a living. This is incredible. It's so much more than a job for me. It's my absolute lifeblood, my heart, my everything has gone into this. And yeah, for me, it is an absolute blessing. I could not imagine being in any other job at the moment. So, but then there is the other thing where it comes to selling their house because it's too confronting. That is a step that you can't really undo, or it will cost you a lot of money, or it's very unlikely. Those people probably don't want to sell that house again because they bought it for a reason. So big things like that, selling a car, selling a house, selling something where that step can't be undone, that I would be a bit more careful with. And some people are like, clothes, for example, I had to sell all her clothes on the day, or his clothes or whatever, because I just could not. Other people hold on to it forever. Some people can't stand having it in their house. I think the trickiest part, you would probably agree with that, the trickiest part is to find that balance between just trust your gut instinct and go for it, or hey, just sit with it and take a moment to breathe here.
Yeah, you're
It's
so
something
right.
that
And
is tricky,
yeah.
but really important to learn. When is it gut instinct and when are you just reacting,
Yeah. And I know some people that have sold their houses in the first 12 months and it's been the best thing they ever did. It's,
Yeah.
it was an instinct, like you say, it wasn't
Mm.
maybe that they were trying to escape the pain or, blocking themselves from something. It was a genuine, I know this is right. I know this is the right time, but
Yeah.
you're right.
And it's
It's just,
perfect,
it's a considered decision, isn't it? Rather than a
Mm.
kind of reaction to
Yeah.
an
Yeah,
emotion, as it
absolutely.
were.
Yeah.
But I think it's amazing what you've done there. So tell us then, Marie, you've obviously done amazing things and you started this movement.
Mm.
What does that look like? How are you supporting people?
Yeah. So that movement, or the idea for the movement, was actually born in Vienna on my trip around the world. And being from Vienna, I was sitting in my previous apartment that my mom moved into when I left. And I had this moment, it was about 7 months into Rob's passing, and I had this moment of reminiscing, when you sit there in your old hometown and you're like, this really overwhelming sense of, I cannot believe what happened the last 7 months, and also how far we have come as a family of three. And then I thought of the book and how it became an Amazon #1 bestseller and ranked in the top 100. And I was like going through this, and all of a sudden it hit me. I still remember the moment and where I sat on the bed, and it hit me, and I thought, I've got something the world needs. There's hope, there's healing, there's happiness. People need that. And that's when I had this idea, I need to do something with that. I need to create like a tribe, a movement around this. And I reached out to a mentor that specializes in that, and I had previously interviewed him for my previous coaching business, and I just reached out to him and said, Mark, this is what happened since we last spoke. It was like 1.5 years prior, and you know, I need your help with this. And he said, yeah, let's catch up when you come back. I said, cool. So I made an appointment there, and then we arranged to meet, like, I don't know, 10 days after I came back from my trip around the world. And 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, I sat in his first, you know, he had like a workshop that day and recorded my welcome video for the group. And I was like, I cannot believe I'm doing this, you know. And then 19th of March 19, I still remember, I'm all about numbers. I opened the doors to Loving Love After Loss, and within weeks we've had hundreds of people come in. And you know what it's like, you know, you started off and then all of a sudden at some stage the growth is just exponential. And when you are authentic and true to yourself and just live from your own experience like you do, people are drawn to that. People come in because people, as you said before, Karen, people want to heal. Deep down, we all have this longing for healing, for happiness, for joy in our lives, for love in our lives. And that is just really something that we offer quite freely in our group. There's so much love and support in there. I've created healing journeys for people in there, healing programs. I don't do the programs anymore, but my biggest one that I focus on now is the retreat, because that's where the really deepest transformation happens. 3.5 days are such an incredible turnaround for people. It really, people do come in with 180 degrees different view, and I've got 100% success rate with these retreats. People do come out completely different. Their perspective, their outlook on life is just, wow, there's a life beyond grief. It's incredible, you know, and I love that. I love this so much. It's my absolute passion.
I love that. So is this for people like grieving any loss, or do you find you attract more widows and widowers because of your story?
Yeah, because of my story, I attract a lot of widows and widowers. But we really have seen a shift. People do come in with having lost their parents, having lost their children, having lost very close people to them. However, where I draw the line is I don't accept people into the group for pet loss. And I totally appreciate that for some people. It can feel just like having lost a family member, because some people just don't have children or don't have any living relatives anymore, and their pet means the world to them. But I also understand when you look at the other perspective, when, let's say, you have a mom in there who's lost her only child, and then somebody comes in, and I know I'm overdoing it here now, but somebody's coming in and grieving their poodle, then, you know, how can you have those two people sitting next to each other in a retreat? That's impossible to me. Like, for that person it might feel the same, but for that person it certainly feels different. So I really want to honor those grieving human beings rather than animals. And I always say there are grief groups for that too, and I'd really, you know, carefully divide them into that
You're
direction.
right, there is, and
redirect,
you know, that's really why I just serve widows, to be honest, because I think even in human losses that they are incredibly different, aren't they? And the people's experience. But even I'm noticing that in widowhood, that you know, everyone's lived experience is different. Everybody's circumstances are different, and you know, we all go through it, and that's grief, isn't it? It's very unique to you. It's very individual to you. We will all do it differently. There's no right or wrong way, but to be able to hold space for people. I mean, I'm doing my first retreats, as you know, this year. I'm doing them here in the UK, one in May and one in July, and I'm so excited,
for you.
I'm so excited to step into this space of, you know, Zoom is an amazing thing. It really, I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation now, and I love it. And my grief groups that I run over Zoom, they are so powerful. However, it's next level, isn't it? Bringing people together in person.
Nothing
in a
beats the personal
space.
connection and the hug.
Yes, the hug.
I'm such a hugger.
I know.
Yes.
So lovely.
That's what we all need.
So lovely, a big hug. So obviously these people come to you for 3 days. Do you hold them around Australia, or are they always around Sydney where you live?
Yeah, so far, interesting enough, it always tended to be in the same direction, not even deliberately, but that's how they popped up for me. And I totally believe in those, in divine guidance around that. So we've been holding them Central Coast, Central Coast, Central Coast, Central Coast, and now we started Hunter Valley. So it's all roughly like an hour and a half north of Sydney. And I love it because it's not directly in the center. I need nature for what I do. I love being surrounded by nature because I'm a big believer in Mother Nature is one of our biggest healers that we don't utilize enough. So it's beautiful. I always said I want a little bit of luxury for my guests too. So I do want them to have the nice location, the nice hotel, the nice food, whatever there is. Like we've had it in Airbnbs that was really big and luxurious, and then we had like now it's the first time we're actually going to a hotel that is retreat based. So they are very much experienced in that, which I love because now I don't have to worry about catering anymore. So it's all in one, and so it's a new experience to do it in a hotel. So I'm quite curious to see how it feels different, but. Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing that I picked up from what you said, and I love that you brought this up because there's the differences, even though we are all widows, or even though one might be a grieving mom and one might be, grieving daughter, or whatever. Um, there are differences, even if the loss is classified the same, as in a child loss, a parent loss, a husband loss, whatever the loss is. Yet, one thing I have learned myself in grief is that comparison doesn't help us heal. It doesn't help us. It does not, it just keeps us stuck. And in so many grief groups, when you come in, you see these comparison battles at their finest. Whose husband was younger, who had more kids, whose kids were younger, who never had the chance to have kids. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? You need to learn to hold space for each other and just be there for each other and listen, because that's what we need the most. Somebody to listen to us who actually understands, rather than going, oh, my husband was younger. Oh, my husband passed quicker. Oh, I had my husband longer, so I had the chance to say goodbye. I'm like, oh, this is not helping us. And the other thing I learned through a really, really beautiful person in our movement, Christopher Kruger, he's one of our moderators. He has lost his son to suicide. And up until I met Chris, I had the assumption that there is no worse loss than losing a child until I met Chris. And he was the one who turned it around for me, which I thought was incredibly impressive, being a grieving parent of a child that he has lost. And he said the same thing to me that I just said before. Comparison does not help us heal. And who am I to say that my loss is worse than yours? We have all experienced the loss of a person that has cut into our hearts so deeply that we need to focus on healing that, rather than saying, this is not natural, or this shouldn't be like that, or that shouldn't be like. Who are we to say how it should or shouldn't be? We are not the creator, no matter what your spiritual belief is. We are not making the rules. Who's supposed to live for how long? So my spiritual background is I believe in soul contracts. I actually believe that Rob and I have chosen this journey together. And it took me a long time to talk about that openly, because I thought, oh my God, I could offend people. People would say, this is against my beliefs. How dare you? People, I went into this judgment and into fear again. And as soon as I stepped out of that and said, well, I'm not telling you how to believe or how to grieve or whatever. I'm just sharing what works for me. And those who are drawn to that, they will join us. And those who are not, that's fine. And people can still find their healing, even if they might have a different spiritual belief. But I stopped saying that, actually, that there is no worse loss than child loss, because it depends on so many different factors. Our beliefs, our upbringing, our spiritual beliefs, our relationship, our mindset at the time, our own spiritual growth, the circumstances. There are so many factors. You can't just say it's worse or easier. There's no easy. There's just your journey, nothing else. And those who you meet along the journey, the most beautiful thing you can do for them is hold space and not compare, or not judge, or not label what is worse and what not. We're not meant to do that. It's not helpful.
And I love that. I think that's it's incredibly powerful, and it's a conversation I have a lot, because I think naturally as humans, we struggle with the acceptance of our own reality. And there's an inherent need within us almost to look at other people's situations and either minimize or diminish what we've experienced, or minimize or diminish what they've experienced, almost creating a hierarchy. And you know, what I always say to people is, you know, like you say, hold space for others, listen to others' circumstances, situations, life experiences, but don't judge. Like, take your own experience, accept that we have no control. Like, to your point, we have absolutely no control over how long any of us are here for. And you know, it's very much focusing on what you can control, not what you can't.
Absolutely. I love it.
And just look for the good in your own story. You know, so many people will say, oh, well, it's easier for me because I haven't got children, so I haven't got to focus on you know, supporting my children through their grief. I can just do me. I don't know how you do it with children. Then somebody else with children will say, oh God, thank God I've got kids. I don't know how you do it without children, because they and it's like, just stop with the comparison. Whether you've got children, you haven't got children, they're older,
just look at your silver lining. That's all you need to do.
Find your good, find your good, and go,
I love it.
This is my situation, and this is what I'm grateful for in it. This is what feels good to me, and recognize that, and allow yourself to feel that without making it a comparison. But we do, it's just naturally, it's like judgment, isn't it? And criticism.
I love that you said it, because you just wrote about that in your newsletter, the judgment. I read that, and I'm like, it's so true. It is so true. We are human beings. We do judge. It's just in our nature. Yes. Yet there is also that, okay, what can I learn from that? What can I do differently? You know, how would it actually be more helpful? And I think that's a beautiful approach.
I think I just try and look at everything that I do, that I think, my behaviors, and rather than judge and criticize myself or others, like what's coming up in me, what's that bringing up in me, and why am I behaving that way, why am I feeling that way? It's all information, and it can really help us discover about ourselves. However, you know, it's remembering that for others as well, isn't it? They're going through their journey, and there's stuff going on for them, and that's why they're in the position they find themselves in, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. And some of us will choose to take these experiences and learn from them and grow from them, because there's an opportunity in everything there is, and that's hard to hear.
Embrace,
you know,
your triggers.
If you're in the very early raw days of your grief, you know, hearing us sitting here saying there's opportunity in that for something, you're going to probably be screaming at us through your
don't
device.
Listen. If you're in your early stages, do not listen.
And I get it, but I think recognize that's not your truth now. However, in time, it could become your truth, and there might be something in this that will allow you to discover parts of you that are actually quite beautiful when you're ready.
This in itself is so powerful, what you just said, Karen. Allow me to highlight that, because it's one of my favorite parts. You know, when you said this is not your truth now, this is one of the many, many, many reframes that I teach at the retreats, for example, where we learn to, when there's a negative experience, emotion, anything, mindset, thought, then to add just those tiny little 2 words. They're so powerful. Right now. I'm not coping with my life right now. It kind of, you know, takes the edge out of it. It takes that heaviness out of it. It makes you understand that this too shall pass, that this is temporary, and it will pass. It will, you will get through this. You will get through this. So for those who are in the really early stages and go like, oh my God, what are you guys on about? You know, stop talking. I can't listen to you. Just know that whatever you're feeling right now, it is temporary, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I can promise you that. And Karen is definitely on my side with that. Like, it's just, I just want to know this. There is a way through it. The healing is possible. It's really important.
It is,
to know.
and that's the overriding message, isn't it? You know, you can learn to love life again after loss and create something beautiful, and that doesn't take away your grief or your love for your person that comes with you. You know, you do grow around it. You learn to live with it, alongside it. And our people, our person, they live on within us. They've shaped who we are. They've given us so much. And what is that for you? You know, Rob continues to influence you and the choices you make, and therefore helps the people you're helping. And that lives on in others. And I think that's such a lovely thing. One of my lovely clients sent me a message, just how she'd really realized how much of an impact Simon had had on my life, and how he'd shaped my outlook, my choices, my decisions, who I've become in that, and then how that in turn is influencing others. So how, you know, Simon's had an impact on me, and
ripple effect,
isn't it? And I just think we can all create that ripple effect. We can all keep, you know, continue to share our person, what they stood for, so that their light continues to shine. And yes, it's not in the way you'd want it to be, but what way can you make it something that feels good for you, that's within your control? And I think but we've all got to, you know, you talked about spirituality and, you know, the belief systems we have. I don't know, you know, I think it's wonderful if you have one, whatever that looks like. If you have a belief system that brings you some comfort, that helps you feel connected to your person, that helps you reconnect with life and find your way forward, I go with it. It doesn't matter what.
Why would I take that off you? Absolutely.
You know, there's no right or wrong here. It's just different people will have different belief systems, and share them, talk about them, because that helps other people explore their belief systems and maybe look at things in a different way. But you know, we've all got to find what feels good for us. And I think that's a really difficult thing, because we're all so worried about what everyone else is thinking and doing, and are we doing it right, and are we capable, are we worthy? And yes, 100%. So Marie, I could honestly, I don't want to stop talking to you, but I'm conscious of time.
I get it.
You know, I just think we are so aligned in our thinking, in our mission, in our passion, in what we want to share with the world. You know, you talk about the movement that you're creating globally, and you know, I very much feel like I'm doing something very similar. I hope one day we get to meet, Marie. I think it would be wonderful if one day
I'm
we
over to Vienna in June. I'm going to Austria in June, July for 5 weeks. So
I've never been to Vienna. Maybe I should. But thank you so much. How do people find you, Marie? And actually, are you able to share this article that you're talking about? Is there a link that I can put in the show notes, because I'd like to read it?
I will find it. I will definitely share it with you. I'm just thinking how I can share it best, because it would be in my movement. Only people can read it there in there, or I'll find a way to share it with you that you can share it as well, because actually it is a really I'll find a way. I either put it on a Canva thing, or I will share it with you, because I actually titled it, I can't remember what the original title was. It was something around widowhood is, I can't remember what the word was, and I retitled it as well, and I called it Widowhood is Reinvention. I absolutely love that, because it's our whole identity changes. You know, who am I after loss? And that's what I packed in there when I rewrote everything. So I'll definitely find a way to share it with you. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I'd love to read it, and I'd love everyone else to have the opportunity to read it as well, because it sounds powerful. It sounds like a real mindset shift, which is a beautiful thing.
It is. Very much.
So I'll share that. I'll share the links to your books, if you share those with me as well, and which I think I've already got actually. But how do people best find you? Obviously, I'll pop your website links and everything in the show notes. But where's the best place to find you, Marie?
So if people do want to join our movement, I think the easiest way is to find the Facebook group called Loving Love After Loss, or when you go on my website, mariealessi.com, you find all the links. You find the links to my book, to my movement, to Instagram if you want to follow us there, to the retreat, to whatever you want to find, to our podcast. If you share the link with me, I'll put it on there as well. So there's the media section on there. There's really literally everything we offer, we do. is on the website. So I think it's the easiest to just share the website because you'll find everything on there.
And just finally, are you loving life after loss?
I'm freaking loving it. I absolutely am. It really, like, honestly, I have my days as well where, where I have a dip. And, but to me, I think to wrap this whole up, everything up that we talk about today, I am not believing that grief will stay with me forever. I treat grief like a visitor, not like a permanent resident. So it does come in every now and then. And when it does, I embrace it. I invite it to sit with me over a cup of tea or in a hot bath, and we sob together and we cry and hug. And then I ask grief to leave again and go back to my happy life. And that's how I handle grief. I really literally imagine, like, I had this thing, if grief was a person, and I've learned to embrace it. And when it comes, I see it as a beautiful memory, and it brings back that sadness to not have that anymore. But then it also brings the awareness of what else I have created through this. So there's a bit of this, I go through my journeys with it, and it's fine. And I have really learned to embrace these visits and to embrace triggers and to get the beauty and the lessons and the gifts from it. And as you called it, the opportunities in that. I really love that. I really love that. And yeah, I'm loving love. Beautiful.
I love that. Thank you so much. It's a
gift,
gift.
Karen. I really appreciate it.
Oh, bless you, Marie. I will look forward to hopefully doing this again sometime. But thank you for sharing with us today. It's been wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Widow podcast with me, Karen Sutton. If you would like to be part of a supportive community of people who understand your grief, come and join my free Facebook group, Widowed and Rising. And make sure you tune in to the next episode of the Widow podcast.